Welcome to the final panel of Bitcoin MENA, everybody. You guys aren't the fair weather attendees if you're holding out this long.
Yeah, the room is full, huh? Look at this.
Yeah. This is this is what it looks like for Sailor, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're like warming it up.
Right.
Or he warmed it up for us.
Well, we're gonna turn the heat up in here a little bit, and we're gonna be talking about cycles. Are they broken? What's going on? We have some of the best minds in Bitcoin to be able to talk about this with all you guys today. And okay, so let's let our hair down a little bit here, guys. Well, I guess I can let my hair down, but for everybody else, what do we think? Are cycles broken? Stephan, I'll throw it to you first. What are you thinking?
So the traditional kind of, as many of us in Bitcoin have been talking, for a while, there's kind of been this loose understanding. What historically people did is ignore 2011 and just be like, okay, green year, red year. That's been a common understanding. Now, I think that's going to break. So at least that thing is probably breaking, is my guess. But open to hear your thoughts. Like maybe we should have an argument about it. Like, is green, red broken? Who disagrees?
I'll take you on in a jiu-jitsu battle, and then we'll see if it's broken or not. I'm kidding. Whether that is broken or not, the way I generally perceive these things is human psychology doesn't change. A lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, look, this time the ETFs are buying, this time the big money is buying, this time the smart money is buying, this time this and this and this and this. And me and MVK, if anyone remembers Clubhouse, when that was still a thing, MVK and I had a kind of a disagreement back in, this was 2020. No, it was 2021. I remember I was in Brazil at the time. And he was like, oh, there's like Michael Saylor and this and that. And this was still early, right? I think he had just set up the Treasury website or something like that. And my position was, look, man, people are retarded. And they're just going to do the same thing over and over again. Doesn't matter if they wear a suit or shorts or whatever. It's just the same process. And fear and greed still drives it. People still want to make money, and people still don't want to lose money. And even though, like, I've been in Bitcoin for so long, I still try, like, when it's time to pay expenses, I'm like, yeah, Bitcoin is going to go up a little bit more next week. Then it goes down. I'm like, oh, shit, I better quickly, pay my bills now. And then I pay, and then it goes up, of course, right? So, like, it's still, after all this time, still gets me. So where I'm getting at with this is NVK was adamant that the cycle was over back then. We had another dump, whatever. I don't know if the timing of the cycle has shifted, but the idea that Bitcoin isn't going to have these like massive dumps or corrections or anything like that again is stupid, in my opinion. I think we are still going to get some sort of ridiculous run up, and then we're going to get a mad crash down again and just wipe a bunch of people out, and wipe stupid people out, but at the same time, the smart money will attempt to get out. And they will sell it at the wrong time, this and that. So I think it's going to be messy. There's no.
I don't even know if it's the stupid people who are getting wiped out. I think what we're witnessing right now with this drop is that I think it's the middle of the bell curve that's getting wiped out. I think it's the middle of the bell curve giving it to the tips of the bell curve with all these sales, and that's what happens in all these cycles.
Yes.
But like that's a key question I think everybody has is like, what's causing this dip right now? Like, why are people selling Bitcoin? Zuby, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's just the human psychology thing. I think that coming up to, it's now Q4 of a post-halving year. And in that time, people are expecting, okay, if it's anything like 2013, 2017, 2021, we're now heading into a downward phase. And so there can just be something that happens in the macro which triggers a massive sell-off, and then you have all the people who are over-leveraged and all of that, and that wipes out, and there's this cascade of the price just plummeting down, and that leads to more fear, more uncertainty, more people start selling, especially people who bought higher, especially people who are newer to it. It takes a while to hold Bitcoin to build conviction. I think most people can remember, like if you've just bought into, whenever you first bought into it, those first few months, that first year, in most people's cases, the conviction is not incredibly high. So if you've just bought this thing and the price is going up in fiat terms, you feel like a genius. But then if suddenly you buy this thing and it drops 5%, 10%, 20%, and it's like, what am I doing? Like, let me off-sell this to avoid any loss. And then I think the longer you've been in the market, the longer you've been holding, the more you've been educating yourself, that conviction just grows. And you've been through these cycles multiple times. You've been through these human psychology cycles, and you've seen the massive runs, you've seen the massive drops, and it's less scary each time.
Yeah.
I think even if you've been holding for a while, I don't think people say that they, feel nothing during the massive dumps. I think there are very, very few people where that's true, where you kind of see your net worth just kind of like, plummet by however much, and you're like, yeah, that feels great. That's just not how human psychology is. I think Alex is spot on. Human psychology does not change. And that's why we'll always have those cycles. So whether it sticks to the 4-year, as it has been, as we're accustomed to, or whether it changes and it extends, I don't know. If I were to say anything, it would be pure speculation. But I totally agree that the psychology is always going to cause, maybe once the market's super, super advanced, then it will stabilize more at a much, much higher fiat price. But for the time being, we're going to keep
psychology is a big, big part. Stephan, you have any thoughts on what's driving the dip?
Maybe it's wrong. People might have had the wrong expectations. Like they thought they maybe were expecting 400K or something ridiculous, and then because of that, now they're sort of like, maybe they're sort of looking at, oh, AI is hot right now, and they're just sort of, there's this, I think there's like a social kind of concept now of people who, again, not endorsing, but they're sort of trying to hyper gamble their way to wealth because they feel like they don't have any other way, instead of just understanding, no, actually you can just save in Bitcoin, like just, just stay humble and stack sats, and you just do that longer term and you'll be okay. But I think maybe people had this expectation and now they're trying to sell. And the other one is also like this kind of the Biden era regulations and so on, where it made it hard for people to take some out, and maybe now you've got this kind of, the IPO movement, as some people have spoken about it, so maybe there's a bit of that. I think it's just, Bitcoin is just maturing, right? It's this power law growth, and some people want really quick returns, and it is going to be diminishing in percentage returns, in percent terms, and yeah, like I think we'll still have these kind of bull and bear cycles, but just not on the 4-year kind of basis like we had before.
Yeah.
What do you think it is that will cause it not to be a 4-year cycle this time?
So an example could just be, maybe it was never about the halving. Maybe it was really always about the liquidity. And and we will just point out now that they've just stopped in the US. They've just stopped quantitative tightening. Everyone's sort of saying, hey, it looks like they're likely to lower the rates soon. They're like, Trump wants low rates. He's likely to get his guy in who will give him that. So maybe we're about to see another cycle of liquidity. I mean, again, we're speculating, but maybe it's just a liquidity-driven thing. And the other aspect is maybe now it's a different class of investor, right? Like back in the early days, it was like retail hodlers and people like that. And now you've got these institutional people, and they are just kind of professionally rebalancing a little bit out. And they're not as in and out as quick. But none of us knows. Like we could see another frenzy come next year, and it could totally undo everything. So none of us really knows, but maybe it's more just like the character of the market is shifting. Now you've got ETFs as like a genuine, big, steady buyer. So I think that's also something that's shifted. So, if you look at the percent of the drawdowns, it's come down a little bit over time. Like the early drawdowns were like 90%, then it was like 86%, then 83%, then 76%. It's slowly less. So maybe the next big drawdown will be 50 or 60%. Who knows?
Yeah, I definitely agree on the macro side. Like I view this as a macro-driven drawdown, and I think the main thing is right now we are technically shifting into a form of easing from the Fed, but everybody has an expectation that might reverse. And I think it's just like inflation's been going up this past quarter, and people are scared. Like in the US, inflation is around like 3% measured by the CPI. And people are like, okay, the primary trend I think that's concerning people is AI demand for energy right now, and some sort of expectation that not enough supply is going to be able to come online, and it takes years for us to build out the capital that's going to enable a lot more of that supply, and that might cause some sort of spike in energy, which is an input to a lot of other different goods, and we might have an inflationary scenario where it starts to rise much more quickly, and perhaps central banks have to reverse policy, or they just run it hot. To your point, Donald Trump wants us to have more liquidity in the system. That's going to benefit him, and we're going to see how that pans out. But I feel like that was kind of the initial drop, and that's what hit markets more broadly. And then we had the psychology kind of come into play, right? And then there was a function of the credit that started to impact that as the market deleverages and people get called when the price goes down. But I think fundamentally, people in Bitcoin have always really needed these, they've always wanted a framework. We had the stock to flow model. We have people talking about power law distributions. We have this 4-year cycle narrative. People want something that allows them to feel like these cycles are predictive. And I think the reality is that we see in markets that marginal supply meeting marginal demand is where we can observe a price in the market. And there's fundamental drivers as to what causes those things to fluctuate over time. But I think that we're just at this point where everybody who believes in a cycle is kind of well, what do I believe in now? What model can I worship? And I don't know, what do you think people are going to start shifting to going forward now? If 4-year cycles are broken, how are they going to start thinking going forward? Are people just going to say, Bitcoin's going up, there's going to be some sort of framework, or there's going to be no framework at all?
I don't know if this specifically answers that question, but I think that even in this conversation, and so many, a lot of people are still really thinking of Bitcoin kind of, I'd say from a trader perspective. So even when we're talking about cycles and we're talking about the price going up and the price going down, it's really sort of thinking as a trader who's trying to accumulate more fiat. And there are millions of people who they're interested in Bitcoin for that reason, right? They're trying to maximize their fiat stack, and they're using Bitcoin to help with that. So there are so many things we can speculate on, but there are certain things which are just solid and which we know, and they're not going to change. We know that they're going to keep printing dollars, pounds, euros, yen, pick your currency. We know that inflation is not going to stop. They're going to just keep printing and printing, and we know that any fiat currency is going to be worth less now, is going to be worth less in 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years than it is now. We also know that there are only 21 million Bitcoin. So for me personally, and what I would generally recommend to people, is to think about the things that are just established and you just know them as fact, and then to adopt a strategy where, whether next year is a continuation of a bull run or it's a bear market like previous, like it's been in, 2018, 2022 and so on, so that whatever happens, you're okay, essentially. Because we were talking about psychology, and that still affects everyone individually, right? We all have emotions to some degree. And I think it's just best to position yourself so that no matter what happens, whatever flies down the pipeline you really cannot predict, you know that you're okay, you know that your family is okay, and you've got a long enough time horizon that you just know, cool, whatever happens in the meantime between here and 2030, 2035, 2045, whatever it is, we're going to be all right.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's important to the structuring. I agree with Zuby. Ultimately, it's a process it's a journey for a lot of people. When they first come in, they may be a trader, and then eventually they sort of go further down the rabbit hole and realize, no, I need to make sure I'm okay, whatever happens. Whether next year is a bear market or a bull market, or we just go sideways, make sure you're okay in either scenario, and that you can keep on accumulating Bitcoin. And it's just a regular thing. A couple of years ago, we used to meme about this DCA army, right? Haas from Australia was one of the guys sort of promoting that idea, and I think for a lot of people, it's just a dead simple idea that works for most people. Just keep DCAing, just keep averaging in, and 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, you'll be very happy.
think I want to just touch on two things. One is, I can't remember whether Stephan or Zuby said it, but to your previous question around what's causing the dip, and then I'll touch on the second part. I'm a little superstitious, and I think Bitcoin requires a couple of things before it continues its thing, its movement. One of them is to basically create either enough fear or apathy that people stop giving a shit about it and go look for something else, which I think you were mentioning, like people are looking for ways to quickly make money, right? So like Bitcoin's boring at the moment. It's boring. Like no one cares.
Yeah, to normies, yeah.
Yeah, like but even somewhat to the big hedge funds and all this sort of stuff, like, 6 months ago, Saylor was all the rage. Now everyone's laughing at him, right? On mainstream media, right? Like because Bitcoin's down, MicroStrategy's down, all this sort of shit. So the one indicator I watch, this is the only indicator I really give a shit about, is the ranking on the App Store for the Coinbase app. That's it. As soon as that thing goes up to when it's ranked like number 5 or more, like I'm looking to like drop some Bitcoin, pay my bills. At the moment, it's like ranked number 400. So like we're in accumulation territory, and we are just sort of in the zone of creating apathy. Like goes up, down, around in circles until people just get so fucking sick and tired of this thing and be like, I could have bought Nvidia, I could have bought this, I could have bought that. And then the tourists leave. And the tourists, doesn't matter if they're retail or institutional or whatever, like when the tourists leave, then the train continues.
It's like you've exhausted the selling.
Exactly,
now,
you exhaust all of that and then they're off.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one piece. Second is, where do people go next? What is the new altar? I guess stock to flow disappeared to some degree. I don't know. Is that guy even still around?
I don't know.
He's still posting, but to be honest, I think the model's
no one
broken,
cares.
so,
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, look, we're humans. We'll come up with anything to explain anything. Like we'll fucking come up without some other new sort of cycle or whatever. But to me, the cycles that matter is not so much the 4-year cycle. I did a talk yesterday actually about larger generational cycles, which to me are more important. And to me, that is generation 1 cycle being the speculative era, meaning that everything around Bitcoin is built, or the relationship to Bitcoin is one of comparison. All of us here have 1 foot in the world pre-Bitcoin and 1 foot in the world after Bitcoin. So our psychological relationship to Bitcoin is one of comparison. What's interesting will be the next generation, the kids who were born in 2010, who don't have a relationship to the old world. Like they will perceive Bitcoin very differently, and they will treat it very differently. They will build differently. They'll do different things. So like in the generation 1, we built product, services, industries that were around how do I accumulate, dispose of, exchange, store, create, which is mining, exchanges, wallets, and treasury codes, right? Like there's no real other businesses. The next thing will be something else. And that's really the cycle, in my opinion, that matters. But as with all things, they sort of, every cycle is a fractal all the way down to, the second timeline. So that's a long way of saying, what's the new sort of deity?
What's the new meta,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah, that's how I think about this. I think that when you want to preemptively understand where something is going, then you really want to get a hold of what the fundamental drivers of it are. And with us in my company, we're a Bitcoin venture capital firm. So we're talking to all these private companies, and we're hearing and seeing all the things that are being built. And when Bitcoin's price runs up, it's a very small percentage of days in which the vast majority of the gains actually occur. And that's just like when the tip of the iceberg emerges above water. But meanwhile, it's been accumulating so much down below. And that's what gives me so much, I think Bitcoin's going up a lot next year. I think we're going to reach all-time highs in the second half of next year. And that's because I see a lot of things going on behind the scenes where I'm really excited of potential forms of adoption that can ultimately come into play. When you understand how big these pools of capital are that exist at institutions, that exist at sovereign nations, of all the millions and billions of people who still just don't have exposure to it yet, it becomes very obvious that we're, a headline announcement away from some sort of massive run-up in the price. And I think that's kind of like the key question is like not trying to focus on these, correlations with historical variables to say what is Bitcoin's price, but really like I see this big opportunity emerging in the future for how people could buy it, and that's actually what's going to drive a run up in the near term in the price because people are going to want to buy it. I'm curious what you guys think. Like over the next 2 years, is there anything that you're like, this is the thing that is going to drive demand for Bitcoin? Like, I see this one group or this one type of activity or something like that that's really going to cause it to get a lot more adoption.
I'd say the institutional there's been shifts at the institutional level. A lot of ETFs have become a big factor in the demand. I think we're starting to hear more about different large pools of capital, right? Like the Czech National Bank bought some Bitcoin, Luxembourg bought some Bitcoin, sovereign wealth funds are buying Bitcoin. Of course, there'll be retail and small businesses stacking too, but I think it's just that pressure will just keep going, and then eventually we'll have another run.
Yeah, I mean, I see two main things, and I think this has just always been the case for Bitcoin. I think there's the adoption from people actually understanding it, and more people, every day more people understand Bitcoin than the previous day, right? There was a time when none of us knew anything about it, and maybe some of us were even skeptical and so on. Everyone goes through that. And every year, the amount of people who get it increases. And then the other one, again, coming back to human psychology, is just the number going up, right? So many people do initially get attracted into Bitcoin because they need to invest in something, they need to park their money somewhere so it doesn't get eaten by inflation. And you see something which is going up, 10%, 20%, 30% over the course of multiple years, hundreds of percent, thousands of percent, and you see that and you're like, okay, that's an interesting investment, and that's what draws people in initially. So I tend to think that the narrative follows the price more than the other way around. Like I think if the price were shooting up right now, we'd actually have a lot of narrative that we'd be saying, oh, it's happening because of this and this.
I told you so.
Yeah, but I think it's, I think the price happens and then the narrative tends to come after that. But I think on a long enough time horizon, like people get so impatient. I mean, remember how hype everyone was when it hit 100K for the first time last year? And then remember when it like hit 100K again, like on the way down, and everyone's like deflated, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is terrible.
Even now, like if it hit 100K again, we'd be like, all right, loser, no worries. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it could go up 10% tomorrow, hit 100K again, and the excitement's not going to be like before. But if I just think eight years ago, December 2017, around this time actually, almost exactly 8 years ago, when it hit $20,000, and it was insane. Like the level of hype was just bananas. And now you think 20K, oh gosh, I wish I could buy some for 20K. That sounds good.
Yeah. Speaking of 2017, I don't believe 2021 was a bull market. I actually think that was like a scam. And seriously, and I have not had 2017 vibes until now. So I'm actually with you on the sense that I think we're going to get a massive run up next year. So here's some bull copium for you all, okay? It's going up, it's going to the moon. But seriously, like because we had the same sort of thing in 2017 where you had like Bitcoin internal wars, it was Bcash, BSV, all this sort of shit. Like everyone was fighting, everyone fucking hated each other. Like there was, the price was going like this and it was shaking everybody out. It created a bunch of apathy, and then all of a sudden we saw this like explosion. And I don't know, it feels very similar to me. It's like not enough people care, but there is actually a lot going on behind the scenes. And it was reminiscent back then because 2017, remember there was like sort of the foundations of Lightning Network were coming together, like all this other stuff was going on in the background. And it was very, very good for Bitcoin. And this thing is, you said it, Eric, it's like it goes up in like a fraction of the days of the year, right? I think it's 11 days of the year or something, like where it makes most of its gains, something like that. So this thing is a beast of momentum. Like when it moves, it's going to move. And you blink, you're going to miss it. So these sort of periods where it is doing the chop, periods of accumulation. Like we are fundamentally in the middle of an accumulation phase, and we're going to have some fun soon. This is the boring part, but this is sort of what gives you the opportunity to acquire and to sort of build some conviction. And it's the same thing over and over again. And just to touch on what Zuby said earlier as well, is all of the other shit doesn't make sense. It's all noise, noise, noise. The only thing that really matters is that they're going to keep printing.
Yeah.
This thing's limited supply. I'm sure there's some paper Bitcoin shenanigans going on. And, you know, we can't prove that, or, you know, like, I'm sure there's something happening, but at some point you can, you know, just like every dollar peg breaks, like you can kind of run shenanigans for so long until something breaks behind the scenes, and then all of a sudden you get the moon or the basement.
This is true. This
One
is
of
true.
the two.
So the key takeaways are the 4-year cycle isn't broken. It never existed. And you're more at risk being on the sideline and trying to worry about any of this in the first place.
And it's
I
going
think-
up. Is that
and
right?
it's going to go up, and that's
Numbers
Forever.
yeah.
Yeah, I think in the short term, you know, I'm not financial advice, but I think in the short term, invest money that you fiat, that you can afford to lose, but on the long term, you know, you invest what you can't afford to lose.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, guys, we're out of time. Thank you, everybody. It's been a beautiful conference.
Thank you.